there are so many pressing environmental concerns, and this is one way to do our part as our last act on Earth to help solve a problem.
Back on a closer look on this Monday, the 12th day of January with Michael Friscolanti. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Derek Turner is here. The weekend is over. A lot of coverage. I know we ran a snippet over the weekend on the Ontario government not doing anything with the booze that is somewhere in storage.
Yeah, we were kind of waiting with bated breath for an answer on that. We did a show about it before Christmas with Tom Cooper from Memorial University out in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Right, yeah.
And he talked to us about how a lot of provinces had started, not a lot, some provinces had started, they decided all this alcohol that they pulled off store shelves right after the tariffs, the U.S. alcohol.
Yes.
They'd already bought it. They put it in storage. It sat there for months. Some of them decided, we're going to sell this and give the money to charity.
Yeah, because why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you, right? We've already bought it. The boycott's still in place. We're not buying any new stuff. It's a win-win for everybody, as Tom called it, a no-brainer, right? And he obviously pushed the Ford government to do the same thing.
Right.
We have in Ontario the largest stockpile. I think it was almost $80 million in U.S. booze. Mm-hmm. And the Ontario finance minister in a year-end interview with CBC said, nope, we're sticking to our guns. We're not moving that alcohol anywhere unless all the tariffs are fully removed. It's one of the leverages we have. It's a big one. And he's right in the sense that it's been enough to upset the United States. Pete Hoekstra talked about it when he was on the show, the U.S. ambassador, that he couldn't quite understand why people are doing that. And obviously, it's obviously one that's having an impact. And I think from what I've read, the bourbon industry, for example, is hurting a little bit because it's a big exporter.
Is there not a distiller in the States that is pausing making bourbon for 2026 because of
that? Could be. I haven't seen that.
I read that,
but you could be right? So I'm not going to lie. After we did that piece, I did some research, and you can order U.S. booze from Alberta.
Yes, you can.
And I did order 4 bottles of bourbon from Alberta.
That's weird. Derek, you get the invite? I don't recall getting the invite.
No, they haven't arrived yet.
Neither has the invite.
But I'll give you half a glass as soon as it comes. I'll give you half a glass. Well, some of them for late Christmas gifts. I told people I'm going to give you this bottle when it arrives. And you know what? You're not breaking the boycott. The boycott is still in place. They're not bringing any new U.S. booze.
Now, how much extra did it cost you?
There was a little bit of delivery.
Sure.
$30 maybe in delivery.
Per bottle or total?
No, I think total. Oh. I don't have the receipt in front of me, Scott.
No. Ill prepared.
Like usual. But as we said in the show, again, I'm not an expert on these things, but can you imagine if the government said half of the money we make on these sales is going to go to charity right before Christmas? People would have felt really good about buying that alcohol, right? And now I guess the argument that the finance minister said was, we've seen some great benefits to local producers because of this boycott. We're seeing local wine producers doing really well, other alcohol, so they don't want to interfere with that market at Christmas, which is a fair argument too.
Yep.
So I guess it works both ways. But as of now, that alcohol's in a mystery warehouse. As far as I've seen, no one's taken a picture of it, so I don't know where it all is.
And that's funny because that's been kept so quiet.
Yeah.
That nobody knows where this booze is being stored.
And like everything, then the conspiracy theories
start.
Right? You see people online go, well, I've heard this about this. I've heard that about that, right? That it was at some cabinet minister's Christmas dinner, right? So it's always funny to see how that goes. But yeah, that's the answer from the government.
But we do know there are 4 bottles at the Friscolanti Manor arriving shortly.
That's right. Not from Ontario, though, from our friends out west.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ontario regulations, this topic always fascinated me. Human composting, which is a terrible transition, but it has to do with government regulations. We did a show on this years ago on our older program, Inside the Village.
Right.
Human composting is a different kind of burial for people,
it is.
so that it's completely 100% natural. Yep. It's good for the environment. It's good for the wallet. And Ontario, back in 2020, had asked for the public input on whether they agree with this as something we should do. And it became a story that we kept following, and nothing had happened. And we actually had a very smart lady from a company called Recompose in Seattle.
That's right, yeah.
I'd want to double-check her name. It was Yarborough, correct?
Yes.
Morgan Yarro. She was from a funeral home in Seattle called Recompose that was specialized in this kind of human composting. And we brought her on a couple years ago to talk about how this process works. And at that point, there's only a couple U.S. states that allowed it. This week or last week, fittingly enough, the Garden State, New Jersey, allowed human composting, which I think brings the number to 14 United States jurisdictions that allow human composting. Still, crickets from Ontario or any other jurisdiction in Canada, it's not allowed. But this issue fascinates me because the cost of death is a major thing. It's a huge thing, right? And people have different ideas now. And a lot of people are more environmentally conscious. They have different ideas on how they want to be, how they want their remains dealt with. And human composting is this emerging idea that isn't allowed in Canada, but it's obviously growing and spreading in the United States. So we talked to Morgan about it. I think considering the latest news out of the United States and the fact that there's still crickets from the Ontario government, it's a great opportunity to revisit this. This was one of our best conversations I thought from the
no
old
question.
So for people who don't know about this issue, it's not on their radar at all. Take a listen to this conversation.
All right, we're talking human composting. And Morgan, I think the best place to start is at the beginning. Your funeral home was the first to offer this service. Can you tell us what exactly it is and why you do it?
Yeah, that's right. So our founder and CEO, Katrina Spade, kind of pioneered this process. We opened at the end of 2020, and we started with about 10 what we call vessels. And these are individual containers that we put folks inside to make this process happen. So we start with a mixture of plant materials, wood chips, alfalfa, straw, those sort of things that we source locally. We make a nice bed of those for the client to go inside of this vessel, and then we also cover them with a nice blanket of the same materials. So you are cocooned inside of this vessel with these natural materials, and all of these are carefully calibrated to optimize the composting process. So what does the work is these microbes that are in our bodies. Nature knows what it's doing, right? When we die, their job is to start the process of breaking us down. So we just encourage that process. It's informed by nature, and unlike cremation, it's not a quick process. It takes anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the individual. But our staff tends to that person inside of that individual vessel every single day for those 8 to 12 weeks. We're attending, making sure that optimization continues, helping that person transform into ultimately what is a very nutrient-rich soil amendment.
Interesting. So what sort of drove her to do this? What was it about it?
Yeah, so she, the story goes that she was in her backyard, and, she's in the city and watching her young son just kind of play in their backyard, thinking about what kind of person he's going to be when he grows up. And then, of course, she's like, wow, when he's 30 years old, how old am I going to be? And then has that, like, yikes, I'm mortal moment. And kind of, thinking about that, what would she want for herself when she dies? And she loves being in the city, but none of the options that conventional funeral homes offer resonated with her. Cremation didn't sound right. She doesn't want to be embalmed, and there are no natural burial cemeteries within the vicinity where she lives. So she started to think of what else could be possible, and then she got into a conversation with a friend who informed her of something called livestock mortality composting. And this is a process that farmers have been using for decades. They, on their land, they will do basically a similar process as a way to effectively kind of compost their livestock. So Katrina thought that was pretty beautiful, but of course wanted to find a way to do that for humans that could be respectful, beautiful, intentional, and that kind of got this journey started for her.
So what happens at the end of those 12 weeks?
At the end of those 12 weeks, we have about a cubic yard of soil. So it's quite a large amount, and that is because of the amount of the plant materials that we have to use in order to make the composting process work. So the person is still a part of that compost, of course, but they're, percentage-wise, a pretty minimal part of it, but the body completely breaks down, and so it's not, you can't tell the difference between the compost that we produce and what you might get from a garden store. And then families can take that home with them if they want. They can plant with it, or if they don't want to take home that full amount, it's about enough to fill up the bed of a pickup truck. We do have conservation partners that they can donate that soil to for restoration.
Morgan, let's build on that if we can for a second, and the environmental benefits of human and composting compared to traditional burial or cremation. Could you speak to that?
I can, yeah. So one of the intentions behind what we do is to reduce the carbon footprint, reduce carbon emissions. And actually, composting in general, not just what we do, it will sequester carbon. Healthy soil sequesters carbon. So that is one of our goals. So instead of some of the, the emissions that come from cremation, the large amount of resources involved in conventional burial, the wood, the metal, the concrete, our process does actually sequester carbon, and the result is something that can be used to nourish the earth, to help restore lands, and you don't have that same benefit with cremation or with burial.
Do most people take the compost home and say put it in their garden where their dad used to plant tomatoes, kind of thing?
Yeah, so almost everybody takes at least some of the compost home.
Mm-hmm.
We find about 60% maybe less, depending on, of course, the month, of our clients want to take all of it home and use it, which is more than we thought. But we've expanded our conservation partner options, and we find that more people are wanting to start to donate there.
And is it the cost beneficial as well? Is it way cheaper to do this than a traditional funeral?
I would say that we're pretty competitive. We're right in between cremation and burial. So we are the base cost for the human composting is $7,000, and that is less than conventional burial by a lot.
I see. And in terms of, sorry, Scott, in terms of getting approval, because this is the big issue here in Ontario, right? Is getting approval.
Yeah.
So how hard was it for you guys to get this kind of approval? Did it take years?
Yeah, it definitely took a few years. Just kind of introducing the idea. Even now it can sound pretty wild and pretty different to people. So really the educational factor, talking to different representatives, scientists, engineers, people who could come in and testify to the initial, the very, very beginning testing that Katrina did with a lot of different methods. This process took, years for her to really kind of figure out with different supporting people. And we use those pilot tests to support the cause. Essentially, we can say, look at this data, it's safe, it's effective, and now client testimonials really help legislation in other states too.
So, Morgan, is it because of all the red tape and bureaucracy that you have to go through to get to this point that, that's why everyone isn't doing it? I mean, I know it's only available in a handful of states in the United States, and of course not available here in Canada yet. And on the surface, it sounds like a great idea. So why isn't everyone doing it, and is that why?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Each state has their own mortuary laws, and it is not easy to change those. You have to essentially start from the ground up, find a representative who feels comfortable and excited about the bill, and even then, depending on the political environment in that state, even if there's support, it still may not pass. Like California, for example, it took a few passes before it actually went through. So it's really just the difficulty in passing a bill to begin with, and also, again, the educational piece. We've had these two options for so long, and it's really just kind of built into our society. So, funeral law is slow to change, and so is the mentality around it.
So what about the critics of this as an option? Some who may raise concerns about potential health risks associated with handling human remains, the spread of pathogens, contaminants. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, we do pretty thorough testing. So the state of Washington has requirements for, more or less quality control, and we do test for pathogens, and we test for heavy metals as well to ensure that what we're giving to families is safe. And the process does kill off most pathogens. There's a few that, if we know the person has it, we can't accept them. They can't undergo this process, such as, Ebola, active tuberculosis, things like that, but things that you generally know in advance. So I definitely understand the concern for the health risk, but with the testing that we do, we know what we're giving back to people is safe. And again, it's been supported by all the pilot testing that Katrina has done for many years.
Morgan, do you have Canadian clients come down from British Columbia to use your services?
Not yet, but we have a lot of people from BC who contact us and who want to do that. And I've spoken with funeral homes up there who are willing to do the transport. Okay. And do you have a ballpark of how many clients you have had over the years come through and use your services? So to date, we've had, I believe we're about 390 clients since we opened in 2020.
Wow, that's a lot.
At the December of 2020.
That's more than that. And sorry, this is a really dumb question, but do people come visit? Like, do they come check on their loved one while they're there for those 8 to 12 weeks?
Yeah, sometimes they do. So we right now, we're a pretty small team. We're by appointment only, but we do offer, if somebody asks, we'll offer them some time to come into the facility, and they can't be right where those vessels are just because there's privacy concerns, and there's also just kind of safety concerns because it is in more or less what was once a warehouse that we kind of built out for our needs, and we have to use certain equipment to do our job. So that's why we typically don't let folks back there directly, but they're welcome to come sit in our facility if they want to spend some time here.
Interesting. Because you're the first ones who've done this, I can imagine you get asked a lot of questions by people who are trying to do this. So you've probably been talked to people from the other states, for example, who've been allowed to do it since then. In Ontario, the government spent 4 years asking people here for feedback on whether we should do it. What would you say to a government official here in our province if they asked you about this and what the benefits are? I know you've spoken about a lot of them, but what would be your key message to them?
Yeah, I would say that there is many benefits. One of them really is, there are so many pressing environmental concerns, and this is one way to do our part as our last act on Earth to help solve a problem. So I think that it says a lot for representatives who are willing to kind of be champions of that. But also, we need to listen to each other, and you need to listen to your constituents. And there are so many people in support of this, and we have so many client testimonials of how it has changed their view of death. It has been healing for them, and they feel that, it's okay if you don't want to choose this, but you should still have the choice. And we're big proponents of individual choice. And I think if, you are coming in as a representative, as a politician, be open-minded to give your constituents more choice.
I think it's a wonderful option, and we've all had these discussions, right, with families and friends. How do you want to go? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Some will say, well, I have a fear. I don't want to be in the ground. Bugs crawling on me, and I don't want to be cremated. So it's a great option. I'm wondering, Morgan, when a new client comes in who may not be aware of this service that you offer, what's their reaction?
Yeah, when we talk to people who may just be kind of curious, trying to figure out what it is, or when we go out into the public to do presentations about what we do, occasionally I encounter people who they hear the term composting, and it kind of has that, that uncomfortable, maybe ick factor at first. And talking about death in general can be hard too. But if they're willing to kind of stick with you, to have a true conversation with you, we want to hear them out, and we want, of course, them to hear us out. And I find oftentimes once you have that genuine conversation, you educate and you hear each other, then oftentimes people will come around. Even if it's not for them, they'll understand why people want it. It
is an uncomfortable conversation, right? I kind of live near a large cemetery. And I drive by it all the time. Yeah. And there's the walls, whatever they call them.
Mausoleum?
The big walls where people put like a shelf, right? Yeah. And people line up in the morning to buy these things from the city when they go on sale. Tens of thousands of dollars to have your casket put in there in this freezing cold wall for however long.
Eternity.
Yeah. I don't know if it's forever, but I'm sure it's for a while. But I don't grasp that. And I've had arguments with a lot of people. I said, why would you even care about that? Like, once you're gone, why do you want this thing? It's not my thing. I know it's some people's thing, right? Yeah. So this, to me, I agree, does make a lot of sense. And why not give people that choice? You want to be in a wall? That's fine. But some people would want, I think that's the key, is the choice.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I'm a big proponent of education just in general, but of being able to choose what feels right for you. Death is scary, but it's something that we all have to go through. And whatever people can do to kind of come to terms with that and feel at peace, I'm pro that, even if it's not necessarily coming to recompose. But I always feel like you should base your choices on education, right?
Morgan, I know it's early and you've only been doing this for a couple of years, but any studies or research that have come out that tell us what the effects on the soil may have with human composting?
Yeah, it's still pretty early, but we do have folks who are kind of work with our soil scientist, Dr. Lynn Carpenter-Boggs, who's been with us pretty much every step of the way, and they are performing those studies right now. I'm looking forward to reading the reports, but they're not ready quite yet.
This may be a really personal question, Morgan, but I'm sure you've been asked it. Have you given thought to this? Is this what you would want to do when that time comes?
Yeah, certainly. I've been in the industry for over 8 years now, and even before that, I was, to my parents' displeasure, perhaps pretty keenly aware of death and interested in asking all those questions. So, yes, I do believe that I want, cremation is definitely not for me. I've been an embalmer. That's not for me either. I want to be able to continue in the natural cycles of the planet, and this is the most direct way to do that. So I've had that discussion, both for myself and my partner, and it's what's resonating for us.
Well, it's interesting, right? We talk about this all the time. Death is one of those things. Sometimes you're in a profession as a journalist. We often cover death and destruction, so we're a little more close to it, and you become a little numb to it. So you're okay having these conversations. Some people don't want to touch these conversations with a 50-foot pole. And that's just the way it is. Is there anything we didn't ask you at all, Morgan, that you think people should know about this issue?
I think you covered a lot of the major bases. I would say a lot of the questions that we get asked, we are a full service funeral home, so it's not just like the composting is the only part we do. We also have a really beautiful facility where we offer clients the option to come in and have ceremonies as well. That we have a couple of spaces for that, and one that I like to talk about that's unique to Recompose is called our Cedar Room. And it's a place where people can come in if they want to do, if they have a religious background that requires ritual bathing, we can offer that. If people want to, do mom's hair or her makeup one last time or just hold her hand, we offer that space too. And it's kind of informed by the practices of more or less home funerals or family-led death care for those who want that. It's a new concept to a lot of people, so we have funeral directors here to guide them through that. But that's one of the things that I find really gratifying about what Recompose offers, and every client I've had use that has reported back to me how impactful and how healing it is to be able to step in and perform their own death care for their person as like a last act of care.
And you're a part of the process. You feel involved. Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I've had clients who come in and they want to do everything themselves. They're like, just open the door for me and then get out of here. And I love that. I love that they have that confidence, even if they've never done it before, but they have that desire to do so. We're always there to help, but it's so interesting to see how many people want to take that on.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Morgan Yarro, Services Manager at Recompose in Seattle, Washington. Morgan, this has been a great conversation. We appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us on ITV.
Thanks, you both. It's been a pleasure.
After listening to Morgan again, it really makes one think about your options when the time comes, and hopefully the time is a long time from now. But it's hugely expensive burial in this country.
It's a big cost, right? And not everyone can afford those costs. No. And I think it's also just, as she talked about, just this idea that people want something different, right? And this idea to go back to the earth the way this process allows, that it's a little more environmentally friendly. All those things come into play. But what's fascinating to me is usually this would be the kind of thing that you'd think that there'd be some jurisdiction in Canada that would jump on this.
Embrace it.
And it hasn't happened yet. And yet in the United States, where you might not think maybe it would happen, it's now growing. It's in 14 states now. So we're going to keep checking in with the province to see where we're at with this. Maybe it's going to go nowhere. But I guarantee that if you had not heard of this at all, you learned something from this episode.
Absolutely. And I just love the fact that the Garden State is the latest to adopt it. Closer look at villagemedia.ca. What do you think? Would you be open to that kind of burial? Let us know. We'd love to know your thoughts. And Closer Look, podcast.ca is our website. We'll send you brand new episodes 6 nights a week. Sign up. It's absolutely free. Tonight's episode is always produced by Derek Turner. For Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Thanks for your time tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 7 sharp, right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.